Hi, Keith here from Academy of Bass. Today I'm going to show you how to play a really great funk slap bass line. And apart from it being a really cool bass line to play, it's packed full of things that will help you improve your technique and that you can use in all of your playing. The song that I'm looking at is Mr Briefcase by guitarist Lee Ritenour. It was on his 1981 album Rit, and the bass player on this track is David Hungate, a great session bass player. The reason why I'm showing you this bass line is firstly because it's funky and it's great to play, but it's also a really good example of how to use slap octaves in a creative way to play a great bass line. Before I start, there's a completely free PDF for this lesson. It's got everything in that I'm going to be playing fully notated in both standard notation and tab. And there's also a bunch of exercises that you can use to practice along to. And I've included a couple of tracks as part of that download too. So the link to that is posted below. Make sure you grab a copy. If you do enjoy this lesson, let me know, give me a shout out in the comments, and feel free to like the video and support the channel by subscribing. It's played with a moving chord progression, the root notes of which are G at the 3rd fret of the E string, A at the 5th fret, B flat at the 6th fret, and C at the 8th fret. Then we move on to the A string and we've got D at the 5th fret, E at the 7th, F at the 8th, and G at the 10th. And we start with a G octave. When we move on to A, we've got a slightly different rhythm, and it's also a little bit more percussive too. So we've still got an octave, but then we come back down to the root note and mute it. So I'm doing that by lifting my fretting finger off the note, but still keeping it in contact with the string, and my thumb is firmly planted into the E string. So we get a really strong muted sound, and that's the core technique that's used throughout the bass line. The other thing about this rhythm is that it's a triplet, so we've got 3 notes in the space of 1 beat. 1, 2, 3. Triplet. So the octave really is an integral part of this bass line. It's what gives it its distinctive character, and it also helps create some motion and really helps to move the song along. When we move to B flat, we keep this same triplet rhythm. But this time I like to play the B flat line a little bit more percussively, so much so that I tend to mute it all. Doesn't say that it's not going to sound great if you let the notes ring out, but I like to play it muted. I like the contrast that it brings and the character that it adds to the bass line. When we move on to C, this time we're not playing an octave, or we're not playing a slap octave, but we are playing a triplet. So we're still playing C here at the 10th fret of the D string, pulling off onto B flat, and then we're playing G here at the 10th fret of the A string. You could hammer on to that G, but you really need some force to make sure that all of those notes are a constant volume. So I like to hit that with my thumb. Helps me keep that at a constant volume. Now, the other thing about this C line is that we're starting from having our thumb rested on the E string. Until then, I'm using very much a bouncing technique. So I use a thumb up slap technique, and that allows me to get a good bit of bounce on the strings. If you play with the thumb down, that's fine. I'm not going to say that you can't play this line, but for me, it's a little tougher. Similarly, if you like to use a parallel technique where you play through the string into the fingerboard, that's fine. But again, that tends to produce a really strong sound, and I just like the thumb up technique because it helps me get a lot more bounce and control. Then we move on to the A string, so we've got D, E, F and G, and it's played in exactly the same way. The only difference is, whereas we played the B flat percussively, when we play the same line over the F, I tend to let those notes ring out. So the strings are thinner, and by letting the notes ring out, I think it really helps the bass line. It also helps create a little bit of contrast. So we've got the muted variation in the first part of the line, and then we let the notes ring out in the second part of the line. Now it's on to the next section, and we're moving from slap bass to fingerstyle. So we're playing C to F to B flat to G. Don't forget, All of this is in the PDF, so make sure you grab a copy of that. This time we're playing a classic 3-note chromatic approach line. So we've got C, G to F sharp to F, C to B natural to B flat, F to F sharp to G, and then it's back to the octave triplet motif. So we've got C, D, E flat, E, F, E flat, D, and then we've got the pull off from C to B flat and the hammer on to G. And then it's back to the original line. So this bass line's got a number of component parts. We've got the octave and we've got the triplet, which we've played in a few different ways. We've played it partially muted and we've played it fully muted. Then we've got the pull-off hammer-on motif, and then there's the move from slap bass to fingerstyle. And transitioning from slap bass to fingerstyle can be tricky at the best of times. So if you play any slap bass lines, having control over how you play octaves and the many variations of playing octaves is a must, because that will help you deliver good lines with a solid, consistent technique and make sure that you produce a good sound. The alternative to fully sounding all the notes is to mute all of the notes, and there's a couple of different techniques that you can use to play this. The first thing that you might want to do is just lay your hands across the strings, and we're focusing on the plucking hand here and the rhythm. So we've got octave triplet, and the same on the E and the D string. Or you could follow the chords, in this case C to D. You've got to be really careful when you do that though, because it's really easy to catch unwanted harmonics when you're moving around. Now, we can also isolate each rhythm type. So we could start with the triplet. So we're just going to play the triplet rhythm. And again, you could move with the chords if you wanted to. And you could do the same with the octave. So there's lots of things to work on and develop there. I've got one more little idea for you that might help you practice playing octaves. I've summarised all of the techniques used in playing this bass line, and I've come up with a little study piece, a bass line that will hopefully challenge you and give you something to work on. It's in the PDF, and whilst I'm not going to be using the backing track, I've included the backing track at a couple of different tempos. So hopefully you'll find a tempo that suits your ability and allows you to practice properly. So here's the bass line. So I'm playing over G to C to D and then back to C, starting with the G octave. That's followed by a, so we've got C octave back to C, and from this C we're sliding to D. From this D we've got a muted octave D, 2 muted Ds. Then we've got another muted octave D, another muted D root note, and then we've got a C hammering onto D. So it's a nice little line, but it's got an awful lot to it, so there's a lot of stuff there to keep you busy. And there's one more thing that I forgot to mention. So anything that you play using a slap bass technique, you can play using your fingers. So have a go at playing the Mr Briefcase bass line with your fingers, or if you prefer it, a plectrum. So Mr Briefcase, it's a cracking bass line that's great for helping you get your slap bass technique together. I really do hope that you've enjoyed this lesson. If you have, give me a shout out in the comments and let me know. Don't forget to grab the PDF, that link's posted below, and feel free to like the video and support the channel by subscribing. Thanks for joining me. Look forward to seeing you again, and in the meantime, happy practicing.